All right, so now we're going to do some fun things talking about past lives. And first things first, I don't need to have a dispute with anyone about whether there are or are not past lives. There's so many different ways that we can have different lives. There are different experiences. Um, One thing we can agree on, science proves that energy doesn't die. It just transforms into something else. So we move into something else one way or another. Now, as I've already talked about from previous lessons in the chakras, those energy centers, they house all of our information, whether it's lifetimes, incarnations, other whatever, all that information is there energetically. So there has to be a way to put all this together. And, you know, if you look at YouTube, there are stories out there that are really, you cannot explain. I mean, I realized, or I saw one recently of I think he was 4 or 5, this little boy who was talking about his friend in the airplane, and he was concerned about his friend who in the war he couldn't be with his friend. Long story short, they researched his story, and he'd been involved in some type of um, air air assault in the war, and his friend was left behind, and he was able to come up with names. And um, I mean, how would a 4 or 5 year old know the name of this person and exactly how to find them? Or, I saw this little kid, like 3 years old, playing the hell out of the piano, like better than an adult. It's like, or, some singer who comes into the lifetime just already unbelievably. How can that be? These proteges, I think that we carry forward, and because this is a karmic truth as well, that however we progress ourselves, we carry forward the sum total of our experience and awareness into our next incarnation, if you will. So that's one piece. The second thing I wanted to talk about briefly is past life regression. And I did 16 weeks of this at one point. I've done many regressions, but I studied it pretty focused, in a focused way, for that period of time. And what I learned about it at that point is it wasn't about do past lives exist or not. That was my original reason for going. I want to find out, do I know someone, or did I know this boyfriend or that person? But when I went in, what I learned was that regression is an incredible tool for healing. So I went into this situation with an enormous amount of pain about a relationship I had had. And then through the process of remembering, or regression, I released all this pain and stuff around the relationships and learned some different things. And when I came out of regression, that was when I learned how to see auras. Um, that's a long story. I won't go into it. It's in my book if anybody wants to read it. But the point was, I healed. And whenever I've done regression or been in regression groups, I've always watched people get incredible information about their current day life that helps them in the moment. So I'm a huge proponent for past life regression, for just as a tool. But it is remarkable what people can get from regression. And there's certainly books out there. The name is escaping me. I think it's Bridie Murphy. That was one of the original groundbreaking books, where this woman was regressed and then she was able to speak a different language. I think that type of thing is remarkable in a certain way. And when you regress, you always start like they begin. It's a hypnosis technique where you're breathing and relaxing, and they're going downstairs and taking you deeper, deeper, deeper. And then they begin by asking you, look at your feet, what are the types of shoes you're wearing, and then you go up the body and what's your garb, what's your clothes look like, because you're trying to determine time periods and location and gender and things like that. So that's kind of how regression works. Now, onward. If you want to read past lives in a reading, because when you read past lives in a reading, I take the same approach, that it's not necessarily, you don't have to worry about does this exist or not exist. It's a tool for gaining information that is maybe impacting people in the current moment, because that's usually how it shows up. Now, the graphic I've showed here in the middle, it's the closest one I could find that illustrates kind of what it looks like. When you see those rings or those layers, it's a position behind the neck, the back of the head, that kind of looks like a half rainbow, where there are layers, not rings, but layers. And when you go to read a past life, what you do is you, in your mind's eye, you're looking behind the head. And if you're asking a question, is there a past life that is affecting this readee or in her current circumstance, you look for the layer that is pulsating or standing out to you the most. And then you, just like when you're reading the layers of the aura, you look at the color, you look at the texture, you look at the speed, and then you begin to look for things. Are there images or items or phrases? Are there things that come up out of it? You just watch it. And then it begins to tell a story. And the story will come forward and you can recount that story to your readee. Another way you can get past life information, and over here on the left, this looked more like a chakra to me. It's not exactly, but it's hard to find graphics that match up to what the images look like. But in a chakra, of course, they're going clockwise. This one's going counterclockwise, but they have depth to them. And so if I'm in a chakra, like I'm doing a chakra balancing, or I'm seeing what's going on in someone's chakra, and they have a certain issue going on, I can usually count. And again, it's kind of like rings on a tree, like when you cut a tree down, which is what this center picture looks like. I can look and go, okay, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4 lifetimes or incarnations that you've been working this particular issue. You can see it in that way. And a reminder here, so much of reading is asking the question and waiting for the answer, and then looking and letting your awareness expand so you can see. So often I describe reading as, listening with your heart and seeing with your awareness. So if you're aware these things exist, then you can notice them. If you don't have the awareness that they're there, it's hard to access the information. So seeing with your heart, or listening with your heart, and seeing with your awareness, and through the tools and focal points is how we do this. Okay, so and we'll try this in a reading setting for throughout the class for people to get a chance to do that. Okay, all right, so let's go on here.